Hey, what's up everyone? This is Music Tech Help Guy and welcome back to my Logic Pro 11 Essentials course. In this video, I want to continue on my demonstration of the edit tools in Logic Pro. In the previous video, we talked about what I consider to be the main two tools, the pointer tool and the marquee tool. We talked about all of the main functions of those two tools, which there are many of them. And also we talked about how to access your edit tools in Logic. In this video, I'm going to be moving on to these other tools, which have kind of more minor features, and a lot of these have some shortcuts that you can use that kind of render the tool useless in a lot of situations, but they are here if you prefer a mouse workflow over using shortcuts. Now, there are a few of these I'm going to be skipping in this video because they relate to topics we have not yet talked about. In particular, the automation select and automation curve tools. We have not talked about automation yet, so I'm not going to even bother touching on these. The pencil tool also is used for automation, but it does have a couple of other minor uses outside of automation, so I'll show you those in this video as well. And then the flex tool has to do with flex time. We're not going to touch on this tool at all in this course. I'll save that for a future flex time editing course down the road. And before I get started, I need to take a quick break to tell you about the sponsor of today's video, Boombox. Boombox is the ultimate all-in-one platform for file storage and collaboration, and it's a game changer for musicians and producers everywhere. Boombox lets you store all of your audio files securely, from single tracks to full DAW sessions. Collaboration is seamless. You can invite fellow collaborators to your projects, set up custom inboxes for them to upload their files, and collaborators can leave time-stamped feedback on your projects, and you can even manage royalty splits and generate contracts. Plus, you can create your own artist profile to showcase your music and connect with other artists around the world. They have mobile apps so you can manage your projects on the go, and there's even a sync app that allows you to upload files directly from your desktop. If you're ready to say goodbye to Dropbox for good, head over to boombox.io and claim your 4 GB of free storage today. Okay, so let's start off with the pencil tool. I'm just going to be doing these in order straight down the list, and I'm also going to be using all of these as the command click tool. So the pencil tool's main purpose is for writing in freehand automation. Automation allows you to write in track parameters like volume and pan and change those values across time, but it also extends to things like plugin parameters, instrument parameters, as well as other region parameters. So we haven't talked about automation much in this course yet, but we will later on. So I'll come back to the pencil tool's automation functions later on down the road. So for now, I'm just going to ignore its automation functions, but it does have some other minor functions. If you use the pencil tool on any MIDI-based track, this will create a blank MIDI region for you. And if you click on any audio track, this is going to bring up the audio import audio dialog. However, there's two different ways you can access this. Like if I wanted to add import an audio file right here at bar 29, I could go up to File, go to Import, and then go to Audio File. Or you can press Shift Command I, and this will do essentially the same thing. So the pencil tool on audio tracks is the same as the import audio function. Eraser tool. So the eraser tool is very simple. It deletes regions that you select. In the MIDI editor, the eraser tool had a bit more useful function where you could go through and just delete certain notes without having to drag over them and use the keyboard. But out in the tracks area, its functionality is very limited just to deleting regions. But once again, it can be used with automation, and it can also be used in flex time, which again, we're not going to talk about in this course. So very minor tool. You can always just click on a region and hit delete to do the same thing. The next tool is the text tool. So the text tool allows you to change the name of regions. So for example, if I wanted to change all of these regions to say Plux Melody, I could click on them with the text tool and then just type in a name, Plux Melody. And you'll see that all of those regions take that name. Another thing you can do with the text tool is you can put numbers on the regions. So maybe I want this to say Plux 01, 2, 3, and 4. So if I just name the first one in the selection to Plux 01, it'll actually name these Plux 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if you're trying to kind of keep your regions nice and named and organized, that's what the text tool is good for. And of course, you can use it on one region at a time as well. The scissors tool. So in the previous video, I showed you that you can actually use the marquee tool to cut up regions, just like so. You drag over, make a selection, and then click to split the region. What the scissors tool does is it allows you to directly do that without using the marquee tool. So this is probably maybe the third most useful tool in the list here, in my opinion. I do sometimes use the scissors tool over the marquee tool in certain situations. And like most of these tools, the scissors tool is going to snap to whatever your grid snap value is. So if I set this to bar, I can cut at the bar lines if I need to cut a region up into smaller pieces, or maybe I just want to cut it in half, or maybe I want to take a little smaller chunk of it. Maybe I want to go to beat and cut here and cut here. So it's going to conform to whatever your snap values are. Another really useful function of the scissors tool is if you need to cut up a region into sort of the same size little chunks, like slicing up a region. So with my snap set to bar, I could do something like this and just cut all of these up one at a time. But if you wanted to do them all at once, all you do is you pull up your scissors tool and then hold Option while using the scissors tool, and you'll see this little extra plus sign, and then click, and it'll slice up that region into equal segments. So because the first cut, the first split was at the bar line, the rest of them are at the bar line. Whereas if I were to put this on beat and maybe do it here, now it's going to cut them up into 2 beat segments rather than 1 bar, or I could even do 1 beat segments. So this is really helpful when you're working with loops and you want to quickly chop up a loop into its component pieces. For example, maybe I wanted to cut this up into little 1 beat segments. I could do that. And maybe I wanted to pull out the snares and then drag over these, hold Option, and duplicate them over. You can sort of completely re-splice. So there are some fairly helpful use cases for the scissors tool. And remember, if you want to split without using a tool, you can just set your playhead wherever you want, select a region, and hit Command T to split. That will also split regions. Okay, let's move down to the join tool. So if you have regions that are cut up, let me go ahead and cut these up again, and you want to join them back together, that's what the join tool is used for. So just select multiple regions and click on them with the join tool, and it will sort of consolidate them back together. This will work with audio, and it will also work with MIDI. So the join tool has some additional functionality when used with audio regions. So for example, if I grab my scissors tool here and I cut this up, and then I click on it with the join tool, all it's really going to do is it's going to join back together all of those splits. So it's not going to really consolidate or create a new audio file in your project. However, if I were to use the scissors tool here to maybe cut and copy some sections out of the loop, and maybe I change up the loop a little bit. Maybe I want this fill to be here. Maybe I want an extra snare hit over here. I could do something like that. And so now I've changed up that loop. If I drag over these and use the join tool, this is actually going to render or essentially bounce in place a brand new audio file, and it's going to consolidate all of those edits. However, there is a very helpful shortcut for the join tool, and that is just to drag over the regions and press J, and this will do what's called a join per track. Now, if you have multiple tracks of audio regions that need to be joined together per track, you can do the same thing. Just select all of them and press J to join per track. So each of the selected regions will get joined together per track. However, there's another shortcut, and this is Command J. And what this will do is it'll actually create a mix down of the audio regions. So it'll actually take all of the selected regions on multiple tracks and consolidate them together down to a new region on a single track. Okay, so next up is the solo tool. The solo tool lets you solo and play back an individual region. So if you just want to hear what one region sounds like, all you have to do is click on it with the solo tool. And so as long as you hold the solo tool down, it'll just play that region, but you can also use this during playback. Honestly, I pretty much never use the solo tool because I prefer to just press S to solo whatever track I'm on. I know this doesn't solo the region itself, and it actually is a bit smoother transition when trying to quickly solo and unsolo things during playback. Next up is the mute tool. This is a very useful function, but not really a necessary tool, because it has a really handy shortcut you can use instead. It's very simple. Whatever region you click on, it will mute that region. Click on it again, and it unmutes the region. So for example, let's say I wanted to get rid of these 4 regions right here, and I don't want to delete them, but I want to take them out of the arrangement. That's what the mute tool does, but there's actually a shortcut for this as well. You'll never have to use the mute tool. You can hold Shift to select non-adjacent regions, and then just press Control M, and that will mute any selected regions. And if you want to unmute them, just hit Control M again. So again, Control M is the shortcut for the mute tool. You'll never really have to use this tool as long as you remember that shortcut. Next up is the zoom tool. This is another tool I don't use very often, but what the zoom tool does is it allows you to drag over a selection and zoom in, and then click again with the zoom tool to zoom back out. You never really need to use the zoom tool because the zoom tool actually has its own shortcut that can be used with the pointer tool. If you hold Option and drag over an area, it'll zoom in, then hold Option and click on the background and it'll zoom back out. There is another zoom tool shortcut, and this is Control Option. This is the one I tend to use more so than just Option, because what Control Option will do is it'll allow you to drag over existing regions on the timeline and then click again to go back out. If you just hold Option, it's not going to let you do that. It's going to try to duplicate the region. So if you just use Option, you're only going to want to do this over like the background. You're going to want to make sure you don't accidentally select any regions to do it. But Control Option is the better shortcut. So I just want to see these, and then Control Option, click to zoom back out. Maybe I want to take a look at these. Control Option to zoom back out. So Control Option is a replacement for the zoom tool. Next up is the fade tool. So the fade tool allows you to create fade ins and fade outs along with crossfades. So with the fade tool selected, you can drag over the back end of an audio region to create a fade out, or you can drag over the front end of an audio region to fade in. But there are some additional features here. If you click and drag up or down, you can adjust the curve of the fade, and you can also adjust the length of the fade. And if you want to create a crossfade, like you're joining 2 different regions together, you just drag over the joining point with the fade tool to create those fades. Now, I'm going to show you real quick here that there's really no need to use the fade tool at all, because there is a very handy shortcut that I alluded to in the previous video. With the pointer tool, if you hold Shift and Control and drag over the back end of an audio region, this will create a fade out. And then while holding Shift and Control, you can drag up and down to change the curve. And then you can also adjust the length of the fade, again, holding Shift and Control with the pointer tool. And the same thing goes for fade ins, and the same thing goes for crossfades. So that's a really quick and easy way to add fades. Now, if you need to remove a fade, you can simply right click or control click on it, and you can select remove fade in or fade out, whichever type of fade it is. Or if you want to remove all fades in a selection, you can select remove fades. And there's one other cool little fade trick in here. If you right click or control click on any fade in or fade out, you can create a speed up or slow down effect, which is kind of like a tape start or tape stop effect, or like a turntable start or stop type of effect. And you'll see the fade turns orange, and watch what happens to the audio playback at that fade. So very cool for creating tape stop and tape start effects. Now, let's say that you want to create like batch fades. Like here, I cut up this loop quite a bit, and just to avoid getting any like pops or clicks at the edit points, I want to add just a real short crossfade to all of these regions. If you drag over all of these, come over to the inspector here, go to the region inspector, and then click here under more. You'll see an option for fade ins and fade outs. You can click and drag up, and this will create a fade, and these values are in milliseconds. I can do the same thing for fade outs. So I can add multiple fade ins or multiple fade outs. But what I really like using this for is for batch crossfades. If you go down to the type here and change this to X for crossfade, and then type in or drag up and down a value for the fade out, maybe like 8 milliseconds, it'll add a 8 millisecond fade to each one of those joining points. So this is a really great way to just create batch crossfades to make sure that all of your edits are clean. This is a feature I use all the time to make sure I don't have any pops or clicks in my edits at the joining points. Now, one thing I do want to mention about fades and the fade tool is that you cannot fade MIDI regions. MIDI regions will not fade. You cannot use the fade shortcut, nor can you use the fade tool on MIDI regions. And I should also mention that if you add a fade in or fade out while you have multiple regions selected, whether you're using the fade tool or using the shift control shortcut, this will add that same fade to all of the other selected regions. So if I add a short fade in right here, it's going to add it to all 3 of these selected regions. And this also works across multiple tracks. For example, if I wanted to create a crossfade for all 5 of these, I could hold Shift and Control and then add a quick little crossfade, and it adds it to all of those selected regions. Next up is the gain tool. What the gain tool does is it adjusts the gain of individual regions. So whatever region you hover over, you're going to get this line, and you can click and drag up or drag down to add more gain or reduce the gain. And if you want to set it back to 0, hold Option and click on it to reset the gain value. Now, I cannot stress enough that the gain of a region is a completely different thing than the volume of the track that that region is placed on. The region gain comes before the track, so it comes before any effects that are on the track. It comes before the sends, it comes before the pan and the volume controls. So you can see here, this is at 0.0 dB. We call this unity gain. It means that there's no added or reduced gain, while the fader has the volume stepped down to -6.8. What I typically use the gain tool for is when I have audio recordings that were made that were a little too soft and I want to pull them up a little bit. Or maybe I have an audio recording that was too loud and I need to pull it down a bit. Sometimes you'll, record with a mic and then you come back to the recording the next day and maybe the mic gain was pulled down a little bit, or maybe you backed off the mic a little bit. You can use the gain tool to kind of sort of fix some of those things. Now, proximity, your distance to the mic is going to matter and is going to change the tone. But if it's a simple issue where in one vocal part the microphone preamp was too low and then in another part it was just right, you can use this to sort of step up the gain of that audio region before you even worry about adding effects or adjusting the level of the track. This can also be helpful with DI guitar recordings, because if you pull up the gain of the initial DI guitar recording, this is going to drive the amp a bit more. So like, here's what this guitar solo sounds like with the gain at the recorded level. So it's got like a kind of medium crunch on it. And if I really pull this up, it's going to drive that amp sim and the pedals and everything that's on the track a bit more. So we're getting a little heavier drive now because the input signal, the gain of the recording has been stepped up. Likewise, if I pull this down, we're going to get a weaker DI signal and probably a little less drive on the amp sim. Think of this, at least for guitar, think of this as kind of like having a volume control on your guitar, but being able to control it after the fact, after you've made the recording. That's kind of sort of what this does, at least with guitar recordings. Now, there are a lot of different uses for the gain tool, but I think those are the most common uses of the gain tool. Now, another way you can adjust gain without even needing to use the gain tool is you can select a region, and if you come over to the region inspector here, you'll see an option for the gain. So you can see that we stepped up this region by 1.4 dB, and you'll see that same value over here. So whatever value you set the region gain to with the gain tool will also control the region gain option over here. And again, if I drag over all of these, hold option and click, it'll reset them all back to unity. And you can see there's no added or reduced gain, but I could pull them up from here or pull them down from here. So this is a great way to batch process your gain adjustments for multiple selected regions. Okay, next up are the slip and rotate tools. These tools do very similar things. So let's start off with the slip tool. So with the slip tool, you can grab any audio or MIDI region, and this also works with pattern regions, although it does convert pattern regions to MIDI when you use the slip or rotate tools. But what this does is it allows you to shift the content around. So for example, I've got this melody up here, and right now it sounds like this. Now, what if I wanted to shift this melodic idea over by a beat or two, or maybe by a bar? The slip and rotate tools will follow your grid snap value up here. So I've got this set to beat and absolute value for now. And if I wanted to shift this melody over by one bar, the old school way of doing it would be to trim up the right side and then shift the whole thing over just like so. And then I'd have to come over here and kind of trim that out. With the slip tool, I don't need to do any of that. All I need to do is grab this and move it over. And you can see all of the content inside of that region is shifted over by one beat. So now I've got a completely different feel to that melodic idea. Now, the thing that the slip tool doesn't do that the rotate tool does is that if you shift your content over left or right, you'll see that it doesn't, automatically loop the content from before and after the initial position. If you instead use the rotate tool, you'll see that it does the same thing, but it pulls content from the left or right side and sort of loops that content from over here when pulling this over. So just as a quick example, let's put this on bar mode, and now my rotate's only going to move one bar at a time. So I could shift the whole sequence over by one bar and create a completely different, melodic feel here. So those are the slip and rotate tools, and this wraps up this video on the remaining edit tools in Logic Pro. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to see more content like this. As always, thank you so much for the support, and thanks for watching.